Maya had been waking up at 6 in the morning for 3 months straight, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her small apartment was barely affordable, and the piano lessons she gave in the evenings weren't enough to cover rent and food. So every single day she would drag her old piano through the empty streets while most people were still sleeping. The piano wasn't fancy. Actually, it was pretty beat up. Some keys stuck when you pressed them, and the wood had scratches all over it from being moved around so much. But when Maya sat down and started playing, something magical happened. The old instrument came alive, and beautiful music filled the air. Her spot was right outside Westfield University, next to a big stone fountain that had been there for decades. She picked this place because it was busy in the mornings when students rushed to their first classes. The fountain made a gentle splashing sound that mixed perfectly with her piano music. Maya knew this campus better than most of the students walking by. 3 years ago, she had walked these same paths every day. She had sat in lecture halls, studied in the library until it closed, and dreamed about becoming a music teacher. Her professors said she had real talent. Her classmates looked up to her. Everything was going perfectly until it wasn't. The scholarship that paid for her education got cut. Budget problems, they said. Sorry, but there's nothing we can do. Maya tried to find another way to pay for school, but college was expensive, really expensive. Working part-time at a coffee shop and giving a few piano lessons here and there wasn't nearly enough. She had to make a choice that broke her heart. She left school just 1 year before graduating. Now, every morning at 8 o'clock sharp, she would start playing. Her fingers danced across the keys like they had a mind of their own. Sometimes she played classical pieces that made people slow down and listen. Other times she played modern songs that students recognized and hummed along to. But her favorite moments were when she played jazz. Those smooth, flowing melodies seemed to make the whole world feel a little bit better. Students would walk by on their way to class. Most of them were in a hurry, checking their phones or talking to friends, but some would stop. They would stand there for a minute or two listening to the music. A few would drop coins or dollar bills into the old guitar case she kept open on the ground. But Maya wasn't really playing for the money, though she needed it. She was playing because music was who she was. There was one girl who stopped by almost every day. She had long dark hair and always carried a heavy backpack full of books. This girl never said anything, but she would stand there for at least 5 minutes just listening. Maya could see the stress leave her face as the music played. When the song ended, the girl would smile and continue walking to class, looking a little bit happier than before. An older man who worked at the university also became a regular listener. He would bring his coffee and stand nearby while Maya played his favorite song. She had learned that he liked old love songs from the 1960s, so she made sure to play at least one every morning. He never put money in her case, but he always nodded and said, "Thank you," before heading to his office. Even some of the professors started to recognize her. There was one teacher who taught music classes who would sometimes stop and listen for a while. Maya wondered if he remembered her from when she was a student, but he never said anything about it. He would just listen, nod approvingly, and keep walking. The weather didn't always cooperate. On rainy days, Maya had to cover her piano with a big plastic sheet and play under a small umbrella. Her fingers would get cold and stiff, making it harder to hit the right notes, but she kept playing anyway. Snow was even worse because the piano keys would get wet and slippery. But Maya was determined. This corner had become her place, and these people had become her audience. Some mornings were busier than others. During exam weeks, students walked by looking stressed and tired. Maya would play softer, more calming music to help them feel better. During the first week of school, when new students were trying to find their classrooms, she would play more upbeat songs to help them feel excited about their new adventure. Maya had memorized hundreds of songs over the years. She could play almost anything by ear, which meant she could hear a song once and then play it on the piano without sheet music. This skill made her popular at parties when she was in college, and now it helped her connect with the students who walked by her corner every day. The money she earned wasn't much, but every dollar helped. On good days, she might collect $20 or $30. On slow days, maybe just 5 or 10. She kept track of every penny because she had a goal. Maya was slowly saving money to pay off her remaining student debt. If she could clear that, maybe she could find a way to come back to school and finish her degree. Between songs, Maya would look up at the university buildings and remember what it felt like to belong there. She remembered rushing to class just like these students were doing now. She remembered the excitement of learning something new, the satisfaction of finishing a difficult assignment, and the hope she felt about her future, but mostly she remembered why she fell in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about being famous or making lots of money. It was about touching people's hearts and making their day a little bit brighter. Even though she wasn't in a classroom teaching students like she had planned, she was still sharing music with people every single day as the months went by. Maya noticed that her morning concerts had become part of the campus routine. Students would time their walk to school so they could hear at least one song. Some would even take pictures or videos to share with friends. Maya was becoming a small but important part of university life, even though she wasn't officially a student. Anymore. She had no idea that this peaceful routine was about to be interrupted. She didn't know that complaints were being made or that changes were coming. All Maya knew was that she loved these mornings, loved this music, and loved the small community that had formed around her piano. For now, that was enough. Dean Patricia Whitmore sat in her large office on the third floor of the administration building, looking out her window at the campus below. She had been the dean at Westfield University for 8 years now, and she took great pride in keeping everything running smoothly. Her office walls were covered with awards and certificates that showed how well the university was doing under her leadership. That Monday morning started like any other. She arrived at 7:30, made her coffee, and began reading through her emails. But 3 messages caught her attention, and they all said the same thing. Parents were complaining about a piano player outside the main entrance. The first email came from Mrs. Henderson, whose daughter was a freshman. She wrote that during her visit to campus last week, she was shocked and appalled to see what looked like a homeless person playing music and asking for money right at the university entrance. She said it made the school look unprofessional, and that she was worried about her daughter's safety. The second complaint was from Dr. Johnson, a wealthy businessman whose son was in his 3rd year. He had donated a lot of money to the university over the years, so his opinion mattered a lot to Dean Whitmore. Dr. Johnson wrote that the vagrant musician was creating a distraction and that it reflected poorly on the university's image. He threatened to reconsider his future donations if something wasn't done about the situation. The third email was the one that really bothered the dean. It came from the mother of a prospective student who had visited campus the previous Friday. She said that the street performer made the university look low class, and that her daughter had decided to apply to a different school instead. The family had been considering a substantial donation, but now they were taking their money elsewhere. Dean Whitmore put down her coffee cup and frowned. She had worked too hard building Westfield's reputation to let something like this damage it. The university had climbed in national rankings during her time as dean, and wealthy families from across the country were now sending their children here. She couldn't afford to lose that progress because of one street musician. She picked up her phone and called the head of campus security. "We have a situation I need you to look into," she said in her stern voice. "There's an unauthorized performer outside the main entrance who's causing problems. I need you to investigate and report back to me by the end of the day." The security chief promised to check it out immediately. Within an hour, he called back with his report. The piano player was a young woman in her early 20s who had been coming to the same spot every morning for about 3 months. She played for roughly 3 hours and collected small donations from students and visitors. Technically, she was performing on public property, but it was close enough to university grounds to fall under their jurisdiction. Dean Whitmore thanked him for the information and hung up. She spent the rest of the morning thinking about the situation. In her mind, this was simple. The university had rules about commercial activities on or near campus, and those rules existed for good reasons. If they allowed one street performer, what would stop others from showing up? Before long, the entrance could turn into a carnival. She also thought about the image problem. Westfield University charged over $50,000 a year in tuition. Parents expected their children to attend a prestigious institution, not a place that looked like it couldn't control what happened at its front door. The complaints she had received were probably just the tip of the iceberg. How many other parents had seen the piano player and decided to look at other schools without even bothering to complain? During her lunch break, Dean Whitmore decided to see the situation for herself. She walked across campus toward the main entrance, where she could hear piano music floating through the air. When she got closer, she saw a young woman sitting at an old upright piano playing what sounded like a classical piece. A small group of students stood nearby, listening and smiling. The dean watched from a distance for a few minutes. She had to admit the music was pleasant, and the students seemed to enjoy it. But that wasn't the point. Rules were rules, and image was everything in higher education. She noticed that the piano was quite old and scratched up, which definitely didn't fit with the polished look she wanted the university to maintain. As she watched, she saw a family with a teenage daughter walk by. They slowed down when they heard the music, and the parents looked at each other with expressions that Dean Whitmore couldn't quite read. Were they charmed by the music, or were they having the same reaction as the complaining parents? She couldn't take that risk. Back in her office, Dean Whitmore made her decision. She called the security chief again and told him to prepare to approach the piano player the next morning. She wanted this handled professionally but firmly. The musician would be told that street performance was not allowed on university property or adjacent public spaces that fell under the school's authority. She spent the afternoon crafting the exact words she wanted the security team to use. It needed to be clear and official, but not unnecessarily harsh. The university didn't want bad publicity from being mean to a street musician. They just wanted the problem to go away quietly. That evening, Dean Whitmore stayed late in her office, looking over enrollment numbers and donation reports. Everything was going so well for the university. Applications were up, test scores of incoming students were higher than ever, and alumni donations had increased for the fourth year in a row. She couldn't let anything jeopardize this success. She thought about her own career path. Before becoming dean, she had worked her way up through the university administration for 15 years. She had seen other schools struggle with image problems and watched their rankings drop as a result. Once a university's reputation was damaged, it could take decades to recover. The next morning, Dean Whitmore arrived at work early and called security to confirm that they were ready to handle the situation. She had decided to go with them personally to make sure everything went smoothly. This wasn't about being mean to the piano player. It was about protecting the university and all the students, faculty, and staff who depended on its success. As she prepared for the confrontation, Dean Whitmore felt confident that she was making the right decision. She had dealt with similar situations before, and they always worked out fine once the rules were properly explained and enforced. The piano player would understand and find somewhere else to perform. The complaints would stop. The university's image would remain intact. She had no idea that this decision would soon backfire in ways she never could have imagined. She didn't know that the piano player had her own connection to the university, or that the students who listened to her music every morning had grown more attached to those performances than anyone realized. All Dean Whitmore knew was that she had a problem to solve, and she was about to solve it the only way she knew how. Tuesday morning felt different from the moment Maya woke up. She couldn't explain why, but something in the air seemed off. Maybe it was the gray clouds gathering overhead, or maybe it was just one of those days when everything feels a little harder than usual. But Maya pushed those feelings aside and got ready for another day of music. She went through her normal routine. Coffee first, always coffee first. Then she checked the weather on her phone to see if she needed to bring her umbrella and plastic cover for the piano. The forecast showed possible rain later, but the morning looked clear enough. She grabbed her jacket, her water bottle, and the small bag where she kept her sheet music. Even though she rarely needed to look at it anymore, getting the piano to her spot was always a challenge. It took about 20 minutes to carefully roll it through the quiet streets. The wheels were old and sometimes got stuck on cracks in the sidewalk. Maya had gotten stronger over the past 3 months from moving it every day. Her arms were more muscular now, and she had learned exactly which route had the smoothest pavement. When she arrived at her usual corner by the fountain, everything looked normal. A few early students were already walking by, probably heading to morning classes or the library. Maya positioned her piano in the exact same spot she always used, opened her donation case, and sat down on her small folding stool. She started with a gentle classical piece, something soft and welcoming to ease into the day. The music echoed off the campus buildings in a way that always made her smile. It was like the whole university was her concert hall. Students began appearing more frequently as 8 o'clock approached, and Maya switched to something more upbeat to match their energy. About 15 minutes into her usual routine, Maya noticed 3 people walking toward her from the direction of the administration building. 2 were wearing campus security uniforms, and between them walked a woman in a dark business suit. Maya had never seen them coming her way before, and something about their serious expressions made her stomach feel tight. The woman in the suit was clearly in charge. She was probably in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back neatly and an expensive-looking briefcase in her hand. Her shoes clicked on the pavement with each step, and she walked like someone who was used to being in control. Maya kept playing, hoping they were just passing by, but deep down she knew they were coming for her. They stopped right in front of her piano. Maya finished the phrase she was playing and looked up at them with a nervous smile. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is everything okay?" The woman stepped forward and spoke in a clear, official voice. "I'm Dean Whitmore from the university administration. Are you the person who has been performing music here every morning?" Maya's heart started beating faster. "Yes, that's me. I'm Maya. I play piano here most mornings. Is there a problem?" Dean Whitmore opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder with some papers inside. "I'm afraid there is a problem. We've received complaints about unauthorized street performance on university property. What you're doing here violates our policies regarding commercial activities on campus." "But I'm not on campus," Maya said, looking around. "This is a public sidewalk. I checked before I started playing here. I made sure I wasn't breaking any laws." One of the security guards spoke up. "While the sidewalk itself is public property, this area falls under the university's jurisdiction. We have authority over activities that affect campus operations and image." Maya felt her face getting hot. "I'm not hurting anyone. I just play music." The students seemed to like it. "Look," she said, pointing to her donation case. "I'm not making much money. This isn't some big commercial operation." Dean Whitmore's expression didn't change. "The amount of money isn't the issue. The issue is that this is an institution of higher learning, not a concert venue. We have policies in place to maintain appropriate standards and ensure the safety and comfort of our students, faculty, and visitors." "But the students do seem comfortable," Maya insisted, her voice getting a little stronger. "They stop and listen. Some of them have told me the music helps them start their day in a good mood. How is that a bad thing?" The dean looked at Maya like she was a child who didn't understand basic rules. "Young lady, I understand that you enjoy playing music, but there are appropriate venues for that. This isn't one of them. We've received multiple complaints from parents and visitors who feel that street performance reflects poorly on the university's image." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wasn't going to cry in front of these people. "Can't we work something out? Maybe I could play at certain times or move to a different spot that's not so close to the entrance." Dean Whitmore shook her head firmly. "I'm afraid not. Our policy is clear. No unauthorized commercial activities are permitted on university property or in areas under university jurisdiction. This includes street performance, regardless of the location or timing." "What if I don't take donations?" Maya asked desperately. "What if I just play for free?" The donations aren't the only issue, the dean replied. It's about maintaining proper standards and preventing this area from becoming a gathering place for unauthorized activities. If we allow one performer, others will follow. Before long, this entrance could become chaotic and unprofessional. Maya looked at the two security guards, hoping to see some sympathy in their faces. One of them looked uncomfortable, like he didn't really want to be there. The other kept his expression neutral and professional. Neither of them said anything. To help her case, how long do I have? Maya asked quietly. Dean Whitmore consulted her papers. You have 24 hours to find an alternative location. If you return here after that time, we will have no choice but to contact local law enforcement and pursue legal action for trespassing and unauthorized commercial activity. The words hit Maya like a punch in the stomach. Legal action, police, trespassing charges. She had never been in trouble with the law before, and the thought of it terrified her. She couldn't afford a lawyer, and she definitely couldn't afford to have a criminal record. I understand, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll find somewhere else. Dean Whitmore seemed satisfied with this response. Thank you for your cooperation. I hope you understand that this isn't personal. We're simply enforcing policies that exist to protect the university and its community. As the three officials walked away, Maya sat at her piano feeling completely lost. Students continued walking by, but she couldn't bring herself to start playing again. Her hands felt heavy on the keys, and her heart felt even heavier in her chest. A few regular listeners noticed that the music had stopped and looked over with concern. The girl with the dark hair who came by every day walked over and asked if everything was okay. Maya managed a weak smile and said she was just taking a break, but she could see the worry in the students' eyes. Maya spent the rest of the morning sitting at her piano, not playing, just thinking. This corner had become more than just a place to earn a few dollars. It had become her connection to the life she used to have and the dreams she still carried. Now that was being taken away from her too, when the morning rush ended and the campus grew quieter. Maya finally packed up her things and began the slow journey home. She had no idea where else she could go or what she would do next. All she knew was that tomorrow morning, for the first time in 3 months, her corner by the fountain would be silent. Wednesday morning arrived with an eerie quiet that nobody expected. Students walking across campus toward their first classes felt it immediately, even if they couldn't put their finger on exactly what was wrong. Something was missing from their usual routine, and it took a few moments for most of them to realize what it was. The corner by the fountain was empty. For 3 months, that spot had been filled with music every single morning. Piano melodies had become as much a part of the campus soundscape as the fountain's gentle splashing and the chatter of students hurrying to class. Now there was just silence where beautiful music used to be. The girl with dark hair who stopped by Maya's piano every morning was one of the first to notice. She had left her dorm room at exactly the same time she always did, timing her walk so she could hear at least 2 songs before heading to her psychology class. As she approached the fountain, she slowed down, expecting to hear the familiar sound of piano keys. Instead, she heard nothing but the wind rustling through the trees. She stood at the empty corner for a full minute, looking around as if Maya might appear at any moment. Maybe she was just running late today. Maybe her piano had broken down. But deep in her heart, she knew something was seriously wrong. Maya had never missed a single day before. Not even when it was raining or snowing, other students began gathering around the empty spot, all with the same confused expression. A guy who always dropped $1 in Maya's case on Wednesdays looked lost without his usual routine. 2 friends who made it a habit to stop and listen between classes stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with the extra time they suddenly had. "Where's the piano lady?" one freshman asked her roommate as they walked by. She had only been on campus for a few weeks, but even she had gotten used to the morning music. It had made her feel less homesick and more like she belonged at this big university. The absence affected people in ways they hadn't expected. A senior who was stressed about his upcoming job interviews realized that Maya's calming music had been helping him start each day feeling more confident. Without it, he felt anxious and scattered as he walked to his morning classes. A professor who taught early morning lectures noticed that his students seemed more tense than usual. They filed into the classroom looking worried and distracted, without the peaceful expressions they usually had after hearing Maya play. He couldn't figure out why the atmosphere felt so different until one student mentioned that the piano player was missing. By noon, word was spreading across campus through text messages and social media posts. Students were asking each other if anyone knew what happened to the pianist. Some worried that she might be sick or hurt. Others wondered if she had simply decided to stop coming. But nobody had any real answers. A sophomore who studied in the library every morning realized how much she had depended on Maya's music to ease her test anxiety. She had a big exam that day, and without her usual dose of calming piano melodies, she felt her stress levels climbing higher than they had in weeks. She found herself humming one of Maya's songs as she tried to focus on her textbook. The campus coffee shop worker noticed that students seemed grumpier than usual when ordering their morning drinks. The cheerful mood that Maya's music had created was gone, replaced by the typical pre-class stress and rushing that happened at most universities. He had never realized how much difference one person's music could make to the entire campus atmosphere. Even students who had never paid much attention to Maya's playing felt the absence. There was something missing from the morning energy of the campus, like a color had been removed from a painting. The area around the fountain felt less welcoming, less special than it had just the day before. A group of music students were particularly upset by Maya's disappearance. They had always admired her skill and the way she could play any song from memory. Some of them had been working up the courage to approach her and ask about her background. Now they regretted not taking the chance when they had it. The girl who listened to Maya every morning finally decided to do something about the situation. She couldn't concentrate in any of her classes because she kept thinking about what might have happened. During her lunch break, she walked over to the campus information desk to ask if anyone knew anything about the piano player. The student worker at the information desk looked confused. Piano player? I'm not sure what you mean. Is this about a school event or something? No, there was a woman who played piano every morning by the fountain. She's been there for months, and now she's just gone. I'm worried something might have happened to her. The worker checked her computer and made a few phone calls, but couldn't find any information about Maya or what might have happened to her. She suggested that the concerned student try calling campus security to see if they knew anything. Meanwhile, other students were having similar conversations across campus. In the dining hall, dorm rooms, and study areas, people were talking about the missing pianist. Many were sharing stories about how her music had affected them, things they had never mentioned to anyone before. One student talked about how Maya's jazz pieces reminded him of his grandmother, who had passed away the previous year. Another shared that the classical music helped her feel less overwhelmed when she was running late for class. A third admitted that he had been planning to ask Maya to teach him piano, but now it was too late. As the day wore on, the absence became even more noticeable. Students walking past the fountain kept looking at the empty corner, expecting to see Maya there, even though they knew she wouldn't be. Some took pictures of the empty space and posted them online with captions like, "Something's missing," and "Where did our campus pianist go?" The campus felt different without Maya's music. Less alive, less connected, less special. Students realized they had been taking her daily performances for granted, assuming she would always be there to brighten their mornings. Now that she was gone, they understood how much joy and comfort her music had brought to their daily lives. A few students even tried to fill the silence by playing music on their phones as they walked by the fountain, but it wasn't the same. There was something irreplaceable about live piano music floating through the morning air, performed by someone who clearly loved what she was doing. By evening, several students had started asking more serious questions. If Maya had left voluntarily, why hadn't she said goodbye to her regular listeners? If something had forced her to leave, What was it? And most importantly, was there anything they could do to bring her back? The empty corner by the fountain had become a symbol of something precious that had been lost. Students didn't yet know what had really happened to Maya, but they were beginning to realize that they couldn't just accept her disappearance without trying to find answers. The silence where beautiful music used to be was becoming louder and more uncomfortable with each passing hour. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more concern, and the beginning of a movement that nobody saw coming. But tonight, the campus felt incomplete, like a song that had been cut off in the middle of its most beautiful verse. Thursday morning came and went with the same uncomfortable silence. The fountain corner remained empty, and students were getting more restless with each passing hour. What had started as mild curiosity was turning into genuine concern and frustration. People wanted answers, and they were tired of not getting any. The girl who had been Maya's most faithful listener couldn't take it anymore. After her morning classes, she went straight to her dorm room and opened her laptop. If the university wasn't going to give her information about what happened to Maya, she would find another way to get answers and maybe even help bring her back. She created a new account on the university's online petition platform and stared at the blank screen for a few minutes, trying to figure out how to put her feelings into words. How do you explain to people that one person's music had become so important to campus life? How do you make them understand that this wasn't just about entertainment, but about community and connection? Finally, she started typing. The title came to her immediately, Bring Back Our Campus Pianist. Then she wrote from her heart about what Maya's music had meant to her and to other students. She talked about how the piano performances had made the campus feel more welcoming and less stressful. She mentioned how Maya's music had helped students start their days with hope instead of anxiety, but she didn't stop there. She also wrote about fairness and community values. If Maya wasn't breaking any laws, why should she be forced to leave? If her music was bringing joy to students and making the campus a better place, shouldn't the university support that instead of shutting it down? She posted the petition at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and immediately shared the link with her roommate and closest friends. Then she held her breath and waited to see what would happen. The response was faster than she had ever imagined. Within the first hour, 50 people had signed the petition. By dinner time, that number had jumped to over 200. Each person who signed could leave a comment explaining why they supported bringing Maya back, and the stories that poured in were incredible. One student wrote about struggling with depression, and how Maya's morning music was often the only thing that made him smile before noon. Another shared that she had been planning to transfer to a different school, but Maya's piano playing had made her feel like maybe Westfield could be home after all. A graduate student mentioned that he had been working on his thesis in the library. Early mornings and Maya's music drifting through the windows had helped him stay focused and motivated. The comments kept coming, each one more heartfelt than the last. A freshman wrote about being homesick and how Maya's classical pieces reminded her of her childhood, piano lessons with her grandmother. An engineering student admitted that he knew nothing about music, but Maya's jazz performances had inspired him to want to learn an instrument for the first time in his life. As word spread about the petition, students started talking more openly about their feelings. In dining halls, study groups, and dorm common areas, conversations kept turning to Maya and her music. People who had never spoken to each other before found themselves bonding over their shared appreciation for the missing Pianist. The petition creator was amazed by how many different types of students were signing and commenting. It wasn't just music majors or artsy students. Athletes signed it, business students signed it. Pre-med students who were usually too stressed to care about anything except their grades took time to sign and share their stories. By Thursday evening, the petition had reached 500 signatures. Students were sharing it on their social media accounts, texting the link to friends, and even emailing it to family members who had visited campus and remembered Maya's music. The momentum was building faster than anyone had expected, but the petition was just the beginning. As students read each other's comments and stories, they realized they weren't alone in feeling upset about Maya's disappearance. Small groups started forming to talk about what else they could do. Some suggested organizing a peaceful demonstration. Others talked about contacting local news stations to draw attention to the situation. A junior who was majoring in communications had an idea that got everyone excited. What if they could find Maya and hear her side of the story? What if she hadn't left voluntarily? What if something had happened that the university wasn't telling them about? She volunteered to do some investigating to find out what had really happened. Meanwhile, students were getting creative about showing their support in other ways. Someone started a hashtag on social media, #BringBackMaya. Others began sharing videos of themselves humming or playing Maya's songs from memory. A few artistic students drew pictures of a piano by a fountain and posted them around campus with messages about missing the music. The petition comments section had become like a virtual support group. Students were sharing not just their memories of Maya's music, but their feelings about the university and what kind of campus community they wanted to be part of. Many wrote about feeling like their voices didn't matter to the administration, and how Maya's situation represented a bigger problem with the school's priorities. One particularly powerful comment came from a senior who was graduating in a few months. She wrote about how Maya's music had been the soundtrack to her final year at Westfield, and how wrong it felt that her last memories of the campus would include this empty silence where beautiful music used to be. She pledged to keep sharing the petition even after graduation until Maya was allowed to return. By Friday morning, the petition had over 800 signatures, and the comments section was filled with dozens of personal stories. Students were printing out copies of the petition and posting them on bulletin boards across campus. The link was being shared in group chats, posted on class discussion boards, and even mentioned in some student club meetings. The girl who had started it all could hardly believe what was happening. What had begun as one person's frustration had turned into a campus-wide movement. Students from different majors, different social groups, and different backgrounds were coming together around their shared love for Maya's music and their belief that she deserved to be welcomed back. But she also knew that signatures and comments, while powerful, might not be enough. The administration had made their decision to remove Maya, and they probably thought the issue would just fade away if they ignored it long enough. Students were going to need to do more than just sign a petition if they wanted to create real change. As Friday afternoon approached, the petition had crossed the 1,000 signature mark. The comment section was full of ideas for next steps, expressions of solidarity, and increasingly angry messages about the university's handling of the situation. Students were no longer just asking politely for Maya to return. They were demanding to know why she had been forced to leave in the first place. The movement was growing stronger by the hour, and it showed no signs of slowing down. What had started as one student missing her morning music had become a powerful demonstration of what happens when a community realizes that something precious has been taken away from them. The question now was whether the administration would listen, or whether students would need to find even more creative ways to make their voices heard. The weekend brought a different energy to campus. While most students were sleeping in or catching up on homework, one determined junior was spending her Saturday morning in the university library, digging into the mystery of what really happened to Maya. She had volunteered to investigate, and she took that responsibility seriously. Her name was Lisa, and she wrote for the campus newspaper. She had covered student events and sports games before, but this felt like her first real piece of investigative journalism. Armed with her laptop, a notebook, and several cups of coffee, she settled into a quiet corner of the library and began her search for answers. Lisa started with the basics. She searched the university's online student directory for anyone named Maya who might have been enrolled in recent years. It took some time, scrolling through hundreds of entries, but eventually she found something interesting. There had been a Maya Rodriguez enrolled as a music education major 3 years ago, but her student status was listed as withdrawn. That was a starting point, but Lisa needed more information. She remembered that Maya looked young, probably early 20s, which would fit with someone who had been a student just a few years ago. But she needed to be sure this was the same person, and more importantly, she needed to understand why Maya had left school. Lisa's next stop was the archives of the campus newspaper itself. If Maya had been a music student, there might have been articles about concerts, recitals, or other music department events that mentioned her name. She spent 2 hours going through old issues, reading every article that had anything to do with the music department. Finally, she found what she was looking for. In an issue from 3.5 years ago, there was a review of the annual Student Music Showcase. The article mentioned several standout performances, including an exceptional piano performance by sophomore Maya Rodriguez, whose interpretation of Chopin brought the audience to their feet. There was even a small photo of a young woman at a piano, and though it was grainy, Lisa was pretty sure it was the same person who had been playing by the fountain. But why had Maya left school? Lisa kept digging through the newspaper archives, looking for any clues. She found another mention of Maya 6 months later in an article about scholarship recipients. Maya's name was on a list of students who had received need-based financial aid to continue their studies. But after that, her name disappeared from the newspaper entirely. Lisa decided to try a different approach. She looked up old articles about university budget cuts and financial problems. What she found made her stomach sink. 3 years ago, Westfield University had gone through a major budget crisis. Several programs had been cut, faculty positions had been eliminated, and most importantly for Maya's story, many student scholarships had been reduced or canceled entirely. There was a particularly heartbreaking article from that time period about students who had been forced to leave school because they couldn't afford tuition without their scholarships. The article didn't mention Maya by name, but it painted a clear picture of what had probably happened to her. Dozens of students had seen their dreams interrupted because of budget cuts that were completely beyond their control. Lisa felt like she was putting together pieces of a puzzle. Maya had been a talented music student who lost her scholarship due to university budget problems. She had been forced to drop out just a year before graduating. And now, 3 years later, she was back on campus every morning, not as a student, but as a street musician trying to make ends meet. But Lisa wanted to be absolutely certain before she wrote anything. She decided to take a bold step and try to contact Maya directly. She posted a message on several local social media groups, explaining that she was a student journalist trying to learn more about the piano player who had been performing near campus. She kept the message vague, not wanting to invade Maya's privacy, but hoping Maya might see it and be willing to talk. To Lisa's surprise, she got a response within a few hours. Maya had seen the post and agreed to meet for coffee on Sunday afternoon. She said she had been wondering if anyone would try to find out what really happened, and she was curious about why a student journalist was interested in her story. Sunday couldn't come fast enough for Lisa. She spent the rest of Saturday preparing questions and thinking about how to approach the interview sensitively. This wasn't just about getting a good story for the newspaper anymore. Lisa realized that Maya's situation represented something much bigger about the university's priorities and how it treated students who were struggling financially. When they finally met at a small coffee shop off campus, Lisa was struck by how young Maya looked. She couldn't be more than 24 or 25, which meant she had been just a teenager when she first started college. Maya was nervous at first, but she seemed relieved to finally have a chance to tell her side of the story. Maya confirmed everything that Lisa had suspected and more. She had been a music education major with dreams of becoming a high school music teacher. Her grades were excellent, and her professors had told her she had real potential. But when the university cut funding for need-based scholarships, Maya's financial aid disappeared almost overnight. "I tried everything," Maya told Lisa, her voice quiet but steady. "I worked 2 part-time jobs. I applied for private scholarships. I even asked my professors if there was any work I could do for the music department, but tuition was just too expensive. I couldn't afford to stay." The hardest part, Maya explained, wasn't just leaving school. It was leaving behind the community she had found in the music department and the dreams she had been working toward for years. She had been so close to finishing her degree, just 1 year away from student teaching and starting her career. When I started playing by the fountain, Maya continued, it wasn't really about the money, even though I needed it. It was about being close to that world again. Hearing students talk about their classes, seeing professors walk by, feeling like I was still connected to the university somehow. Lisa asked Maya about the morning when she was told to stop playing. Maya's face darkened as she described the encounter with Dean Whitmore and the security guards. She had felt humiliated and powerless, especially when the dean threatened legal action. I understand that the university has rules, Maya said. But it hurt to be treated like I was some kind of criminal. I was a student there. I belong there, just as much as anyone else, even if I couldn't afford to stay. Maya also revealed something that Lisa hadn't expected. She had been using the money from her street performances not just to pay for rent and food, but to slowly chip away at the student debt she still owed the university. Her dream was to eventually pay off what she owed and find a way to re-enroll and finish her degree. Every dollar I made brought me a little bit closer to coming back, Maya explained. It might have taken years, but I was determined to find a way to finish what I started. As Lisa listened to Maya's story, she realized this wasn't just about one student's bad luck or one dean's strict rule enforcement. This was about a university that had failed to support a talented student during a financial crisis, and was now preventing that same student from rebuilding her connection to the academic community she had been forced to leave behind. Lisa knew she had found something important, something that went far beyond the simple story of a missing street musician. This was about justice, second chances, and what kind of community Westfield University really wanted to be. Monday morning brought a new kind of energy to campus. Lisa had spent all of Sunday night writing her article about Maya's real story, and it had been published in the online campus newspaper first thing in the morning. Students were reading it on their phones as they walked to class, and the response was immediate and powerful. The article revealed everything that Lisa had discovered. Maya wasn't just some random street musician who had been bothering the university. She was one of their own former students, forced to leave because of budget cuts that had destroyed her financial aid. The fact that she had been slowly saving money to pay off her debt and hopefully return to finish her degree made the situation even more heartbreaking. But some students weren't content to just read about the injustice. They wanted to do something active to show their support. The girl who had started the original petition had an idea that would change everything. If Maya couldn't play her piano by the fountain anymore, maybe they could bring her music back in a different way. She sent messages to everyone who had signed the petition, asking them to meet at Maya's old corner at 8 o'clock Monday morning. Her plan was simple but powerful. They would gather at the fountain and play recordings of Maya's music on portable speakers, while holding signs asking for her return. It would be a peaceful demonstration that honored Maya's music while showing the administration how much the campus community missed her. About 30 students showed up that first morning, which was more than anyone had expected. They brought handmade signs with messages like "Music belongs here," "Bring Maya home," and "Art makes campus beautiful." Someone had managed to record several of Maya's performances on their phone during previous weeks, so they had actual audio of her playing to share. As Maya's recorded piano music filled the air around the fountain, something magical happened. Students walking by began to slow down and stop. Some started humming along to songs they recognized. Others pulled out their phones to record what was happening. The demonstration was creating exactly the kind of peaceful, joyful atmosphere that Maya's live performances had always brought to campus. But the most powerful moment came when students began singing along to one of Maya's recordings. It was a simple melody that everyone seemed to know, and voices joined in one by one until there was a small choir of students singing together by the fountain. Someone captured this moment on video, and it was this recording that would soon change everything. The video was only about 2 minutes long, but it told the whole story perfectly. It showed dozens of students from all different backgrounds gathered around the empty space where Maya used to play. Their signs explained what they were fighting for, and their voices singing together showed how Maya's music had brought the campus community together. The fountain splashing in the background and the morning sunlight streaming through the trees made the whole scene look almost magical. One of the demonstration organizers posted the video on social media with a simple caption, "Our campus pianist was forced to leave, but her music lives on in our hearts." Hashtag bring back Maya, hashtag music matters, hashtag Westfield University. She tagged the university's official accounts and included a link to Lisa's newspaper article explaining Maya's story. At first, the video spread slowly within the campus community. Students shared it with friends, posted it in group chats, and sent it to family members. But then something unexpected happened. People outside the university started seeing the video and sharing it too. Maya's story and the students' response touched something deep in people's hearts. Within 6 hours, the video had been shared hundreds of times. Local community members who had never heard of Maya before were commenting about how moved they were by the students' solidarity and the injustice of her situation. Alumni from the university started sharing the video with their own networks, adding comments about how proud they were of current students for standing up for what was right. But the real breakthrough came when a local news reporter saw the video and realized this was exactly the kind of human interest story that people needed to hear. She contacted the student who had posted the video and asked if she could interview some of the demonstration participants for the evening news. By Tuesday afternoon, the story had completely exploded beyond anything the students had imagined. The video now had thousands of views and hundreds of comments from people all over the region. Local radio stations were talking about Maya's story during their morning shows. Social media influencers with large followings were sharing the video and expressing outrage about how Maya had been treated. The hashtag bring back Maya was trending not just locally, but across the entire state. People were sharing their own stories about budget cuts affecting education, talented students being forced to drop out, and the importance of supporting arts and music in communities. Maya's situation had become a symbol of larger problems in higher education. News stations from 3 different cities sent reporters to campus to cover the story. They interviewed students from the demonstration, got responses from university officials, and even tracked down Maya herself for comment. Maya was overwhelmed by all the attention but grateful that people were finally hearing her side of the story. The coverage wasn't just local anymore. A national education blog picked up the story and wrote about it as an example of how budget cuts were affecting real students' lives. College students at other universities started sharing the video and talking about similar situations at their own schools. Maya's story was inspiring conversations about educational access and support for struggling students across the country. Meanwhile, back on campus, the daily demonstrations at the fountain were growing larger. What had started with 30 students was now attracting over 100 people each morning. Faculty members were joining the demonstrations, showing their support for both Maya and their students' right to peaceful protest. Even some staff members were participating during their breaks. The university administration was feeling the pressure from all directions. They were getting calls from reporters, emails from angry alumni, and social media messages from people demanding that Maya be allowed to return. The story was no longer just about one street musician. It had become about the university's values, its treatment of former students, and its responsiveness to community concerns. Dean Whitmore found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. What she had thought would be a simple enforcement of university policy had turned into a public relations nightmare. The video of students singing together by the fountain was being seen by hundreds of thousands of people, and almost all the comments were critical of the university's handling of the situation. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of the viral video was how it showed the genuine emotion and community spirit that Maya's music had created. Viewers could see that this wasn't just about students wanting entertainment. It was about young people fighting for something beautiful and meaningful in their daily lives. It was about a community that had lost something precious and was determined to get it back. As the video continued to spread throughout the week, it became clear that this was no longer a problem that the university could ignore or wait out. The students had found a way to make their voices heard far beyond the campus boundaries, and the response from the broader community was overwhelmingly supportive of Maya and critical of the university's actions. The question now was whether all this attention and pressure would be enough to bring about real change, or whether the administration would continue to stand firm on their original decision. But one thing was certain: Maya's story had touched people's hearts in a way that nobody had expected, and the movement to bring her back was stronger than ever. By Thursday morning, Dean Whitmore knew she had to do something. The situation had spiraled far beyond anything she had anticipated when she first decided to remove Maya from campus. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from reporters, concerned alumni, and even board members who were asking tough questions about the university's handling of the situation. The viral video had been viewed over 500,000 times, and the comments section was filled with people expressing disappointment in Westfield University's treatment of Maya. Worse yet, several prospective students had called the admissions office to say they were reconsidering their applications because of how the university had handled the situation. The very image problems Dean Whitmore had been trying to prevent were now happening on a much larger scale. That morning, as she sat in her office trying to figure out her next move, Dean Whitmore made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of continuing to defend the university's position, she decided to watch the viral video one more time and really listen to what the students were saying. As she watched the footage of students gathered around the fountain singing along to Maya's recorded music, something shifted in her perspective. These weren't troublemakers or protesters trying to cause problems for the university. These were her students, the very people she was supposed to be serving, and they were united in their love for something beautiful that had been taken away from them. She paused the video at the moment when the camera panned across the crowd of students singing together. There were future doctors, teachers, engineers, and business leaders all joined in harmony around a shared appreciation for music and community. This was exactly the kind of spirit and unity that universities were supposed to foster, not discourage. Dean Whitmore realized that somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of what really mattered. She had become so focused on maintaining the university's image and following policies that she had forgotten about the human impact of her decisions. Maya wasn't just a rule violation to be dealt with. She was a young woman with dreams and talents, who had already been let down by the university once before. The more Dean Whitmore thought about it, the more she realized that this situation was an opportunity, not just a problem to solve. Here was a chance for the university to show that it cared about former students, that it valued arts and music, and that it was willing to listen to its current students when they spoke up about something important to them. By noon, Dean Whitmore had made up her mind about what she needed to do. She called her assistant and asked her to set up a meeting for the next day, but this wouldn't be an ordinary meeting. She wanted to bring together Maya, several of the student demonstration leaders, and key university administrators to see if they could find a solution that worked for everyone. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in the dean's conference room. Word spread quickly among the students who had been organizing the demonstrations, and there was a mixture of excitement and nervousness about what might happen. Some students were hopeful that the administration was finally ready to listen. Others worried that this might just be a public relations move with no real substance behind it. Maya was the most nervous of all. She had never imagined that playing piano on a street corner would lead to sitting in a meeting with university administrators. Part of her was excited about the possibility of returning to her spot by the fountain, but another part of her was afraid to get her hopes up. She had been disappointed by the university before, and she wasn't sure she could handle another rejection. When Friday afternoon arrived, the conference room was packed with more people than Dean Whitmore had expected. Along with Maya and the student leaders, several faculty members had asked to attend, including professors from the music department who remembered Maya from her time as a student. The head of student affairs was there, along with the campus security chief and several other administrators. Dean Whitmore started the meeting by doing something that surprised everyone. She apologized. Not just to Maya, but to all the students who had been affected by the decision to remove her from campus. She acknowledged that the administration had failed to consider the positive impact Maya's music was having on the campus community, and that they had responded to complaints without fully investigating the situation. "I've spent the past week learning about Maya's story," Dean Whitmore said, looking directly at Maya as she spoke. "I had no idea that she was a former student who had been forced to leave due to circumstances beyond her control. I also didn't understand how much her music meant to our current students and how it had become such a positive part of campus life." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to the dean's words. For the first time since this whole situation began, she felt like someone in authority was actually seeing her as a person rather than just a problem to be solved. But Dean Whitmore wasn't finished. She had come to this meeting with more than just an apology. She had a proposal that she hoped would address everyone's concerns while also helping Maya achieve her ultimate goal of completing her education. "I'd like to offer Maya a position as our campus musical ambassador," the dean announced. "This would be a part-time paid position that would involve scheduled performances at designated times and locations around campus. Maya would become an official part of our campus community with all the support and resources that entails." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed this unexpected offer. Maya looked stunned, unable to believe what she was hearing. Dean Whitmore continued, "But that's not all. I've been talking with our financial aid office and the music department, and we'd like to offer Maya assistance in re-enrolling to complete her degree. We can't undo the budget cuts that forced her to leave, but we can try to make things right going forward." One of the student leaders raised her hand and asked the question that everyone was thinking: does this mean Maya can return to her spot by the fountain? Dean Whitmore smiled. "Not only can she return, but we're going to make it official. We'll install a small plaque designating that area as the campus music corner, and Maya will have scheduled performance times there as part of her new position." The room erupted in excited chatter as students and faculty members began talking. All at once, Maya sat quietly, still trying to process everything that had just happened. In the span of 1 week, she had gone from being told she was unwelcome on campus to being offered a job and a chance to finish her degree. When the meeting ended, Maya found herself surrounded by students and professors offering congratulations and support. The girl who had started the original petition gave her a huge hug and told her how happy she was that the campaign had succeeded. Faculty members from the music department welcomed her back and started talking about how her experience could inspire current students who might be facing similar financial challenges. The following Monday morning felt like a celebration. Maya returned to her corner by the fountain, but this time she wasn't alone. Dozens of students gathered to welcome her back, and when she played her first notes, the crowd broke into applause. The music that had been missing from campus for over a week was finally back where it belonged. Local news stations covered Maya's return, and the story of how student activism had led to positive change spread just as widely as the original viral video. Westfield University received praise for listening to its students and finding a creative solution that benefited everyone involved. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came later that week, when Maya was walking across campus to her first class as a re-enrolled student. As she passed groups of students, several of them recognized her and waved. She was no longer just the piano player by the fountain. She was a member of the campus community again, working toward her dream of becoming a music teacher while sharing her gift with everyone around her. The corner by the fountain had become more than just Maya's performance space. It had become a symbol of what was possible when people stood up for what they believed in and when institutions were willing to listen and change. Every morning, as Maya's music filled the air and students gathered to listen, it served as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are worth fighting for.